Okay, we are going over Unit 4, and Unit 4 is basically just covering photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So there are a few key terms that you need to understand, and I'll make sure to include it in the page that this video is found. But first we're going to start with photosynthesis, okay? So photosynthesis is going to happen in the chloroplast. And if you remember cells, this is found only in plants. This is found only in plants. So animals are not going through this, it's just plants. So you definitely need to know the formula, but basically sunlight plus water, or H2O, and CO2 are going to go into the plant. It's going to go through a chemical reaction, and out is going to come glucose, or C6H12O6, and oxygen, O2. Okay, so this is going in. These are the reactants, and these are the product. So if you remember in the PowerPoint, it talked about two types of metabolic pathways, so catabolic and anabolic. So catabolic, you are breaking down larger molecules into smaller ones, and then in anabolic, you're making larger ones from smaller ones. So here we have really small molecules, water and carbon dioxide, and we're creating glucose, which is like a big molecule. So this is going to be anabolic. Okay, so photosynthesis has two phases. It's going to be light dependent and light independent. Light dependent, this means it requires light. And then it's light independent, or also known as the Calvin cycle. And this does not require light. Okay, so we're going to talk about light dependent first. So light dependent is going to happen in the leaves, specifically in the chloroplast. And then you have some key terms that you need to be able to understand. So we have thylakoid, which is basically like this little disc. We have grana, which is a stack of discs. And then we have stroma, which is this like liquid, very similar to the cytoplasm that kind of surrounds everything. And all of these are found inside the chloroplast. Okay, so light dependent is going to happen specifically in the thylakoid. Okay, and this is where your sunlight is going to get absorbed in the leaves. Okay, in the leaves you have this pigment called chlorophyll, and that's what makes plants green. Okay, so they are absorbing the sunlight, and then coming out of that, they're making ATP, which is a type of like an energy storing molecule, and NADPH, I'm sorry. Okay, so this is the end of this. Okay, so then we're going to get into the light independent reaction, or the Calvin cycle. So in the Calvin cycle, you're starting with this, and you got to break it down into something else. Okay, so this is all happening inside the plant as well, specifically in the stroma. So in that liquid kind of surrounding everything. And what it's going to do, it's going to break down these two molecules, and it's going to give you the glucose and the oxygen that you need. Okay, that's photosynthesis. Let's now talk about cellular respiration. I don't feel like writing that all out. Okay, so cellular respiration is going to happen in both plants and animals, and this is going to happen in the mitochondria. So remember, your mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Mitochondria. In plants, and animals. It also happens in bacterias, but we really talk about it just in plants and animals. So your formula is going to be glucose and oxygen go in, and then out come ATP, which is going to replace our light energy or the sunlight, plus H2O, which is water, and CO2. Okay, so there are two kind of like categories for cellular respiration. We have anaerobic, and we have aerobic. Okay, so anaerobic, no oxygen. Okay, the first cycle, or the first process of cellular respiration is going to happen. It's going to be called glycolysis. So during glycolysis, we don't have oxygen. In glycolysis, we are breaking down glucose. Glycolysis, we are breaking down glucose. So we are breaking down a large molecule to make smaller ones. Ooh, yikes. This is going to be a catabolic pathway. Remember, we talked about that earlier. Okay, so glycolysis is going to break down glucose, and you're going to end up with ATP and a molecule called pyruvate. You don't really need to know anything about pyruvate, just that it's made, because we're about to break this down in like 5 seconds. So after this, it's going to start an aerobic process, and it's going to go to the Krebs cycle. So this is going to use use oxygen. Use oxygen. It's going to be the Krebs cycle. Krebs cycle is going to take this pyruvate that was made in glycolysis, and it's going to break it down into more ATP, NADH, which is just a molecule that we're going to break down in a second, and FADH2. This is going to make 2 ATP molecules. This is going to make 2 ATP molecules as well. Okay. Oh, and I should have noted, glycolysis is going to happen in the cytoplasm right outside of the mitochondria. The rest of them are going to happen in the mitochondria. Okay, so now we're getting into the electron transport chain, so ETC. You're taking these molecules and you're breaking them down. Ooh, you're taking these molecules and you're going to break them down. So you're going to break down NADH and FADH2, and you're going to make a lot of ATP. A lot of ATP. You will end this entire process, for eukaryotes, you'll end up with 36 ATP. If you're a prokaryote, you'll end up with 38. Okay, but in not all cases, you have oxygen available in order to go through these two processes. So what your body does instead is this process called fermentation. So fermentation is going to be another anaerobic process. So no oxygen. And there's 2 types. The first one is going to be lactic acid fermentation. And your body's going to go through this when it's mainly your muscle cells. So if you work out, if you play a sport, if you've done a lot of physical activity and you end up really sore the next day, that's that lactic acid that's forming. Okay. The second one is going to be alcohol fermentation. And this is more for food products. So this is going to make like cheese, yogurt, some types of milk, alcohol. So fermentation is not efficient. So you're not getting enough as much as you would in these two cycles, but it gets the job done. Okay. Hope this helped. Let me know if you need anything.